Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Lebanon has never been a sovereign nation to the fullest extent. As it emerged from under French control, its stronger neighbor, Syria, still dominated its politics, except when Nasser's Egypt dominated Syria and then, by extension, Lebanon. Subsequently, it has fallen victim to civil war, Iranian influence, and Hezbollah state within a state, with its terror militia having prominence above the military. Now, finally, thanks to Israel soundly defeating Hezbollah during last fall, the new leadership in Beirut is challenging the heavily armed Shiite party to disarm and make Lebanon a sovereign, if not great nation. So what are the various factors and prospects? How crucial is America's role in all of this? And will this cause Israel to be more secure throughout this process and beyond? Joining us to discuss these matters include Mr. Ori Saschal, who is head of the research department at the Israel Defense and Security Forum, or IDSF. It's great to see you all.
Good to be with you, Jonathan.
Also joining us is retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, formerly a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs, among a long list of other positions. It's great to see you, General.
Great to see you, Jonathan.
And last but not least, our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, today was an interesting meeting between U.S. envoy to Syria, not necessarily Lebanon, but he's also involved there, and Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barrack, heading quite a large delegation to include leading senators, from Senator Lindsey Graham to Senator Shaheen to other members of Congress, to really show support for the leadership and presidency specifically of General Joseph Aoun in the bid to once again reclaim sovereignty over this, I wouldn't want to say battered nation, but nonetheless, it is in that context.
So earlier, presidents who are always Christian and earlier prime ministers who are always Sunni were quite spineless when they had to contend with Hezbollah, and obviously knowing full well that Iran is behind Hezbollah, they always back down. And they did not want to have any showdown with Hezbollah. But thanks to the Israeli victory over Hezbollah last September to November, Hezbollah is now quite down on its luck. And because the Americans and the Israelis are backing up President Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, there is the possibility that Hezbollah will have to reassess its position. Of course, it will not disarm completely and immediately, but we may see the start of a process.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. General Kimmett, you are among the skeptics. I must say that I also party amongst them with regard to Lebanon specifically, in light of the really nuanced challenges that this country has faced for so many years. Is there a sense of some type of optimism these days to see the really evident leaps that this government has managed to make in recent months, since the armistice that was signed, of course, under U.S. and French supervision between Israel and the Iranian proxy Hezbollah back in the 27th of November of last year?
Yeah, I would say that I'm cautious, hopeful, but unfortunately in Lebanon, we've seen that type of situation degrade. There was a quite small window of time at about 2006, once the Syrians had left, till about 2009, where things looked like they were going to turn around. But I still consider the great concerns. Number one, will Hezbollah rearm and grow again? And as a result, be an alternative force inside the political system because they can get their way by guns. And second, we've got to accept that the massive corruption in Lebanon is always going to hold it back from being a fully sovereign nation.
Absolutely. Well, the matter of corruption, it's just a cancer in Lebanon, but not only there. It is in many of the countries in the Middle East and around the world, quite frankly. But nonetheless, Mr. Issachar, I'd like to ask you specifically, when we're talking about the Lebanese government, to what degree can it sustain in the face of continued effort by Hezbollah to arm?
So, Jonathan, I would say that there is a great deal of motivation on the part of the Lebanese government. And what we have left to be seen, well, except for being cautiously optimistic about the chance of Israel-Lebanon forming a formal peace accord, this is not quite around the corner yet. And there is a series of conditions that need to metastasize before that happens. What makes us more cautiously optimistic today than a year ago is, of course, the success of Israel vis-a-vis Hezbollah, making it really back on its heels militarily and politically speaking. The Lebanese government can suggest some things that former Lebanese prime ministers were assassinated over, including the father of the former Prime Minister Said Hariri, of course, Rafik Hariri, assassinated by Hezbollah in Syria. But now Syria's dictator Bashar al-Assad is gone, and Hezbollah is significantly dampened and weakened in Lebanon. And Israel helped what I would call a de-Iranization of Lebanon, at least militarily speaking. And the political leverage currently over Hezbollah is not nearly there. The Lebanese government, however, can make public statements and public commitments, such as the government resolution to disarm Hezbollah, that they could not have made before. Now, what would mean practically, I would suggest that either Israeli or international assistance would need to be heavily involved, because the Iranian boot on the neck of the Lebanese government is to much lesser extent exists in the country. But right now, in order to form these conditions, Lebanon needs strong support, not just financially, but also militarily. I personally doubt that the United States would put boots on the ground in Lebanon, but I would suggest either an Israeli support from, leading from behind with the efforts of the Lebanese military, or an international involvement of some sort, like in Yugoslavia or other war-torn zones. Otherwise, Hezbollah, make no mistake, can metastasize, can regrow, and there are efforts right now by Iran to reaffirm its grip over the country. And these are the conditions without which Lebanon simply cannot move on.
Just a correction, former Yugoslavia. That's
Former
for the sake of some of our viewers who are keenly observant of the situation there. And of course, General Kimmich has his experience under NATO's command, of course, in that context. But when we're talking about Rafik al-Hariri, which Ol just mentioned, the investigation found that there was Hezbollah involvement as the executing arm of the attack that murdered the Prime Minister Rafik al-Hariri. When this came to light, the judge had to flee for his life and actually relinquish his position, similar to the port of Beirut that alluded to the fact that Hezbollah was behind this, and ultimately had to close the case for fear that the judges and those prosecutors would be put under the thumb of this Iranian proxy. But now we do hear that, the Lebanese government is really being emboldened by the support that they're receiving. And now, when Ambassador Barak is visiting Beirut, he came out and stated the Lebanese government needs to provide a clear plan by the 31st of August, or a couple of days thereafter, in order to find some type of reciprocity from Israel, in which whatever the Lebanese do, Israel will then accommodate and be able to start a gradual process of withdrawal, but to ensure that Hezbollah is indeed disarmed.
Well, General Laoun, I believe, is the first former army commander since Fuad Shihab in 1958, when the Americans landed at Beirut to serve as president. Obviously, he has a military background. And the lesson of the 7th of October for Israel is that Israel cannot rely on the thin veneer of its borders and contain whatever is happening on the other side and wait for an attack to defend. It must prevent, preempt, and you mentioned boots on the ground. There are boots on the ground, the IDFs. And whether the IDF will withdraw from the de facto security zone remains to be seen and will be done as a reciprocal measure once Israel believes that the process of disarming Hezbollah is now in force.
President Shihab was 1958, but there were a couple, Colonel Lahoud and the others.
Not as presidents.
Not as presidents.
No.
So they were
only politicians.
Politicians. Okay. Well, General Kimmett, I'd like to hear your take on the American angle to this, since America seems to be quite invested in the success of bringing about some type of change for the Lebanese people and for the Lebanese government to assert its sovereignty. What was mentioned in today's discussions is that in order to push back on Iranian influence in Lebanon, Arab Gulf countries would enter with significant investments. Is that realistic when we're talking about pushing back on a regime that is more prone to invest in terrorism than in its own people to find a certain scenario in which they would withdraw in this context?
Yeah, first of all, I'd correct him here. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Suleiman, who was the penultimate president of the country, was previously the chief of staff of the military. Look, I think some conditions need to come about for Lebanon to be sovereign, and then even more unlikely conditions before Lebanon again becomes the Paris of the Middle East. I think the example with Bosnia-Herzegovina is a good example that despite all of the international assistance, despite significant movements towards a federated government that seems to be working, it is always hampered by the fact that it is not a multicultural country. And the same thing inside of Lebanon. And of course, we talked about corruption. So it may be a sovereign country, but it will also always be a handicapped country. Now, with regards to the United States, I think it's very, very unlikely that they will get anything more than some economic support, some military support. I used to be in charge of military assistance for Lebanon in the old days, and rhetorical support. No, the United States is never going to put boots on the ground inside of Lebanon. It's not of any national interest to the United States. In terms of putting boots on the ground, I think it would probably come number 15 or 16 on the list of where we would put boots on the ground as a priority. So my feeling is the United States, it's good to see Lindsey Graham and company in there. I think, again, they're offering rhetorical support. They probably brought some money with them. But aside from getting a good view of the clock tower in the middle of Beirut, I'm not really certain what America is prepared to do. As Amir said, the ultimate guarantor of stability inside of Lebanon, aside from the LAF, is going to be Israel, and I think we understand that. As long as Israel can keep their foot on the neck of Hezbollah for a period of time before we see the ultimate outcome of Iran, I think it's going to be a country, it's going to improve, but it's going to be handicapped and limited in what it can achieve.
Indeed. Well, I couldn't agree more. Though when I look at the various actors trying to rearm Hezbollah, we're talking, of course, about the Islamic Republic of Iran utilizing various routes from smuggling routes in northern Syria, utilizing Bedouin clans, not necessarily only the Shiite militias which operated under the behest of the RGC Quds Force, but we're also seeing various money laundering routes or funneling routes rather from Turkey, where a blind eye is currently the modus operandi, and same goes for the situation in Libya and elsewhere, where we see the Russian presence allowing for all kind of various smuggling routes to penetrate into Lebanon. The Lebanese government is doing its best, and Israel is, of course, doing its part in the situation. There are other actors involved, but nonetheless, it seems that Hezbollah, as was also stated late last night by Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem, they're not looking to be disarmed, and they will hold the Lebanese government responsible if it were to try to do so. Mr. Issachal, in this context, what am I missing?
No, you're absolutely right, Jonathan. And Hezbollah's raison d'etre is to continue to exist as an Iranian arm to destabilize Lebanon and really render it into a semi-sovereign state, much like drug cartel dominated Cuba or other places, even Mexico to a certain extent in some parts of the recent 2 decades. But Lebanon has essentially become hostage in the hands of the Iranian regime and via proxy Hezbollah, not only on the ground, but also in government, in cabinet, and until 2020 or 2022, also as a majority in the Lebanese parliament. And so I would suggest that it is only, and I believe I said it on your show previously, it is only the Lebanese people and the Lebanese government who can make that happen. The force to propel that change to happen lies not only with the Israeli Air Force or with the United States financial support, it lies within the Lebanese people themselves. The government itself was, as we said before, was incapable of leading that change so long as that boot on the neck existed in the form of Iran and its proxy Hezbollah. Once this one has been significantly moderated, yet not altogether vanished, this is up to the people and the government to decide whether or not to tackle Hezbollah and Iran head on. And once Lebanon ceases to exist as a semi-sovereign state, but rather as a fully sovereign state, then I believe the authorities there can provide a much better answer to Israel, even more than today's, for example, HTS regime by Ahmed al-Shara in Syria, or needless to say, the Gaza Strip. Lebanon presents a much more vital and opportunity for Israel than any other potential country in the region, but Saudi Arabia. The only question is, to what extent would they be ready to really dilute and reject the Iranian and Hezbollah influence and grip in their country?
Mr. Owen, what can convince Israel to withdraw within the context of a Lebanese plan that Ambassador Barak spoke of? And is there a viable reality in which the Beirut government manages to disarm Hezbollah without armed interference?
First of all, I stand corrected. Mark was right. You were right. There were a couple of ex-generals who served as presidents, but under Hezbollah. So I was wrong on the facts, but right on the conclusion. I'm trying to save at least a semblance of credit. Now, Israel will not trust anyone with its defense. Certainly not any empty words by Lebanese politicians or by the French, and actually by anyone. It will keep watch on what is happening on the Iranian Hezbollah axis, whether Syria manages to stop all smuggling or most of the smuggling. Israel will keep hitting Hezbollah targets as it has done several times over the last couple of weeks, almost every day. Even minor Hezbollah operatives trying to set up shop anywhere are being hit. Financiers, logistics, not only fighters. So it will be self-reliance from now on.
General Kimmett, the United States has declared war on cartels. Hezbollah happens to be a cartel in all of the list that would designate such an organization as one. They have a very large network of operations throughout South America as well and other locations around the world, and are very close allies of many of those cartels in Southern America and Central America and this brings to mind to what degree does this involve the United States into potentially also dealing with Hezbollah in other locations around the world, since it is committed to dealing with those terror groups that operate, of course, in the sphere of criminal activity.
Um, Much like boots on the ground, Lebanon being a very, very low priority, I think in terms of the cartels that we are talking about and the designated terrorist organization, at this point, Hezbollah is, again, pretty low down on the list. If you take a look at the cartels in Central and South America, they're going to get our focus and our attention and our activity well before we're going after Hezbollah. I think we will support countries such as Israel with intelligence support, with financial support, military support, indirectly as a way to support Israel's efforts against Hezbollah. But I'm afraid at this point, if you want to control Hezbollah, Israel is the only country that will be fully involved in that.
I'm speaking actually specifically about Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, where it holds multiple installations, including Central America,
Yeah.
excuse me, in Southern America. I assume that in the event that those type of installations are linked to other cartels, the United States would see them as valid targets, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I mean peripherally involved. If we happen to go after MS-13 and we find a couple of guys dancing to Shakira there, I think we would be very happy. But I don't think we're going as a direct response to a Hezbollah threat embedded in a cartel.
Understood. Well, we are drawing to the end of the program, and I'd like to grant each of you the opportunity to have a closing analysis and raise a question within the context of your analysis. What is the prospect for potential peace or normalization between Jerusalem and Beirut? Mr. Issachar, we'll start with you.
So I'll go ahead and be cautiously optimistic, Jonathan. But as we said, I think that the key here involves tackling Hezbollah, not only moderating but rejecting altogether its presence in Lebanon and the de-Iranization of Lebanon as a whole. You were absolutely right about the narco-terrorism. The United States understands for decades now that Hezbollah is also propelling illicit drug cartels and narco-terrorism around Latin America, and by so doing, propelling some of the illegal migration through the southern border and across the 11th parallel from Latin America onto West Africa and onto Europe. There is a vast network of drug trade that Hezbollah has been leading and profiting off of it in billions of dollars. And so absolutely this needs to be tackled. But the main challenge would be for Israel to continue enforcing the ceasefire and gradually demilitarizing southern Lebanon. And of course, the question would be, would the Lebanese people and the Lebanese government have the tools and the motivation to finally crack down on Hezbollah, reject its influence, and steer their country toward a better future after half a century of civil wars and being taken hostage by Iran and Hezbollah? I think Lebanon deserves the answer to that.
Absolutely. General Kimmett?
Yeah, listen, I'm a great friend of Lebanon's, always have been, associated with a bunch of Lebanese expat groups here in the United States. But I think even they know that how far Lebanon can improve is even limited if Hezbollah was gone. Again, I think we'll subcontract that to the Israelis for quite some time. And candidly, I think any talk of normalization would be responded to quickly, if not fatally, by Hezbollah.
And not just by Hezbollah. I think Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, who is a close ally of the radical left, the Marxist left within various international fora, is also in that context, unfortunately. But he is an interim practitioner of sorts, and will most likely not be in that post for very much longer unless they're not able to make up a next government based on election. Mr. Owen?
Jonathan, let me refresh your memory. We already had a peace agreement with Lebanon 42 years ago, May of 1983. Menachem Begin was in power, Amin Jamal, but the Syrians under Hafez Assad aborted it, and this was before the rise of Hezbollah. And of course, many actors and factors have changed. It is possible gradually. There are problems regarding territory and defensive positions. It can happen alongside a process with Syria. We may yet see it in our lifetimes.
Well, Lebanon is a beautiful country blessed with the Cedars that built magnificent structures over the years, but
I happen to have been in Beirut and Junia and other places, and along the coast, of course.
of course,
You're right.
of course. In that context, just how long did the peace between Lebanon and Israel last?
Several hours.
Exactly. This is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Kimmett and Mr. Issachar, as well as you, Mr. Amir Oren, and all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.